Hi, this is Bill Hartzer, and this is the Digital Marketing Podcast with Bill Hartzer for Thursday, July 30th, 2020. I have the unique pleasure of having Khalid Saleh here from invest.com. Welcome, Khalid. And tell me a little bit about yourself and your background and how you got into conversion rate optimization, which is something that we're going to talk about a little bit about today.
Very good. Thank you for having me, Bill. So in a prior life, prior to starting to invest, prior to thinking about conversion optimization, I used to be a software architect. And
Sure.
one of the last projects that I worked on was for Motorola.com, large investment, $35 million. They're in Chicago. They're flying in 120 engineers, 3 architects. I was one of those architects. Basically, whatever we wanted to do, whatever technology we wanted, we would have built on the site. At that point in time, I started looking into digital marketing, SEO, and I'm thinking to myself, silly me, I'm like, oh, maybe they're not going to get enough traffic. No, it's Motorola. They will get enough traffic. They were running ads on TV and billboards and newspapers, celebrating the launch of their new site. 3 months into the project, $35 million, we launched the website. The first 2 hours, they've gotten so much traffic, the site goes down. 16 servers, 16 microsun servers that go down. I still remember, panicky call that I get. It's like, oh, the site is down. Figure out a way to bring it back up. I'm like, oh, no worries, we can bring it back up. And I was like, puzzled. I'm like, 16 servers. You don't easily bring down 16 microsun servers.
Sure.
Bring it back up, and I'm like, wow, I guess they will have the traffic. It's Motorola after all. Another problem pops up. A month later, we're looking day in, day out. Hundreds of thousands of visitors come in, and no one is placing an order. $35 million, 10 orders. That's what we ended up with. I mean, that is it cost $3.5 million to get an order. Would have been cheaper for Motorola to hand out $1,000 to people and say, hey, just place an order with us. Probably cost them even less. So some people lost their jobs. Others like me thought to themselves, oh, this is an interesting problem to solve. And that's how Invest was born back in 2006, solely focusing on conversion optimization. At that point in time, there was only marketing experiments doing conversion optimization. And the Eisenberg's brothers, Brian, Jeffrey, Future Now. Otherwise, there was no other company doing conversion optimization.
Sure. So when I think about conversion optimization, certainly, we start thinking about, obviously search intent. So we want to actually get visitors to the site that use the proper keywords. We want to get, we want to make sure that they search for the right keyword or they come from the right website if it's a referral, and then then obviously hit your page. Then at that point, that's where conversion rate optimization or conversion optimization comes into play. Is okay, we've gotten them the traffic. What happens now? How do we, we have 100 visitors and 2 people place an order or 2 people fill out the contact form. That would be a 2% conversion rate. So what do we do to kind of, I guess, get a higher,
higher conversion rate?
2 out of 100 visitors. Well, let's get 4 out of 100. That'd be that would double the conversion rate, right? To 4. But obviously, we'd like to see 40, 50, 60, out of those 100, fill out the contact form and be interested in.
So no, that's an excellent question, and you bring up lots of points. First off, by the way, lots of times I tell people, lots of companies that contact us and they come say, oh, help us with conversion optimization, help us increase conversions. And I look at their sites and I tell them, you don't have a conversion problem, you have an SEO problem. And they're like, really? I'm like, because when you're only getting 100 visitors or 200 visitors or 300 visitors, I'm like, it's difficult for us as conversion optimizers to really figure out intent. Because half of those people did not really landed on your website by mistake. You probably should get a lot more traffic. So I always tell people, I'm like, and people don't like to hear that. And I'm like, listen, I'd love to take your money as much as the next guy, but I also want you to stay my friend for the next 10 years. You're better off focusing on SEO or PPC, bring more visitors to the site. That will actually help us uncover the conversion problem. So that's number one. Usually I tell people, I'm like, you need to drive significant traffic, like at least 10,000, 20,000 visitors in order for you to start really figuring out the conversion problems. At a
Sure.
second level, there's some basics that you got to get out of the way. If the site is too slow, well, no one is going to wait for your site, like, for 20 seconds, 22 seconds. We're working with a client, and they're a large company, but it was taking their homepage and their product pages, they're an e-commerce website, about 22 seconds to load. And I'm like, I understand, like, there is some technology problem that's causing this, but guess what? I understand it as your consultant. Your visitors don't. They're like, oh, I'll go to the next site. There's another, like, million other sites that I can be visiting. Get the performance issues out of the way. Get the mobility issues out of the way. For most websites, visitors are coming on mobile. Lots of times what we see nowadays is lots of people design their websites for desktop, and then they converted it into mobile, correct? So it was not a mobile first mentality or thinking.
Sure.
That works for Google, like, because Google wants us to have the mobile, like, responsive websites, but really doesn't work for visitors. For a visitor who's coming to your website for the first time on a mobile device, is it really the best experience or not? That's a really good question that I think people should not answer so quickly. They're like, yeah, of course. No. Is it really the best experience? That's the question that you need to ask. The third thing that you want to get out of the way is just get the bugs out of the way.
Yep.
If your site is buggy, if it's crashing somewhere, let's get, and bugs are different things for different websites, correct? On an e-commerce website, bugs is I'm trying to place an order, click on the add to cart, and it doesn't work. On a content website, sometimes some of the content that you see is a bit buggy. I'm like, oh man, you forgot to complete the sentence over here. And I'm trying to download your white paper and it's not working. So let's get those things. This is kind of the very basic level. If you think about this, if you think of it as a pyramid, the next level is what I call usability. Is the site user-friendly? Now, Norman NNG group came up with the 10 usability metrics that every site should follow. I am submitting a form. Your site probably should tell me that, like, oh, wait for the server to respond, or we're collecting your information, as opposed to me sitting there twiddling my thumbs and I'm like, oh, what's going on? Did they accept my form or didn't they? The worst example I have to give this, regardless to where you stand on the healthcare debate, is healthcare.gov. We had an office in Europe, so I never actually had to use it until last year. I'm like, oh, we're back in the US. Let's go ahead and fill out. Let's get the insurance.
Sure.
So it's like 14 steps, and I'm filling it out. And for some reason, whoever developed it, because it seems like, every time we develop a website, we say, oh, let's relearn, usability from the beginning and ignore everything that people had learned. And you fill in step 5, they're asking me for documentation. I go back. I'm like, oh, let me collect the documentation. I disappear for half an hour. I come back. Oh, you have to start from step 1. I'm like, no way. We can't do this. 14 steps. And I was like dying by the end. I'm like, no, why on earth are you doing that? Let's get the usability out of the way. Then the next step is when we get into conversion and persuasiveness. You've mentioned it. And I think Google has been telling us about this for a while. And we knew it, but now we're like really have to think about it. That visitor intent, that searcher intent. There's an intent when somebody searched for something and landed on your website. What did they want? And are you providing them with the best information and the best messaging that actually meet what they're looking for? Not in the way you think about your marketing, but in what the visitor thinks about. And that's a problem that's with marketers, correct? We use too much marketing language or marketing speak and empty words that mean very little. And I'm guilty of this as much as the next marketer. For a long time, and I wrote the copy on the homepage, it used to say world-class conversion rate optimization for established brands and fast-growing startups. And I'm thinking to myself, like, oh, this is great. And it's funny because I see other CRO firms that just copied the same headline from us, and then they changed it a little bit, but it's the same headline. And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, we get quite a bit of traffic to our site, but no one is converting us from that homepage. I'm like, this is just very strange. So I listened to 46 client interviews. We conduct lengthy interviews with clients, and we're trying to understand from them is what was going on in their lives before actually pulling the trigger and saying, okay, you know what, I'm going to hire a CRO agency. I don't care about the experience after hiring the CRO agency, what happened. Let's figure out what was going on in your life. Where were you sitting? What was going on in your mind? What were you thinking about? We complete those interviews, and I'm like, oh, we need to change the copy completely. So we've changed it to, we've been expecting you. It's time to grow your business. That's a lot different than world-class conversion optimization. One is very focused on us and what we think of ourselves. Our visitors did not care much for it. The other is focused on the visitor and what they want to accomplish. For the longest time, I thought people came to us to buy conversion optimization. That's what they told us.
Sure.
Then I talked to this one large company. He runs a CMO runs a marketing budget of $80 million. Great. I'm like, he can afford our services, $80 million. Who can? And I'm talking to him and I'm like doing my best. Like, and I'm like, oh, there it is. Khalid's bringing on his A game. And then I'm talking to their CMO and he's like, Khalid, can I be honest with you? He's like, I'm debating whether I should hire you guys or if we should continue sending our catalog in the mail. We know that sending our catalog in the mail converts. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, what? I am not competing against other CRO firms. I'm not competing against a PPC firm. I'm competing against catalogs in the mail. And I lost. So it makes you stop as a marketer to think, who are you competing against? In the mind of the visitor, your potential customer, there's many alternatives that run through them. And sometimes we're so narrowly focused that we miss the whole boat.
Sure. So we think about, also our websites, and certainly there are certain things that we can do, like write 10 different headlines, and 10 different and use different colors, and test different things. When I mentioned search or intent before, I kind of wanted to give you the example of a website that I was working on at one point, and there was an issue with search or intent, and basically it ended up being that there's two. This particular company does construction, and they build. One thing that they do is they build schools. Well, if we could think about some of the phrases, and I was looking through, one of the phrases was school construction. So meaning that, there's a school and you are literally going to build or add on or build a building, versus construction school, where you're going to actually go to a school to learn how to do construction. Yeah. So completely different search or intent, but essentially what you would think on the outside, are initially the same word, school construction versus construction school. So we do have to get that right, as you mentioned.
Yeah, definitely. No, understanding visitors, what they are trying to accomplish on your website. So one of the very first things that we do whenever somebody comes in and says, hey, we'll hire you for a CRO, is we'll tell them, we want to do a couple of things. One is we want to spend 5 to 7 hours talking to your current existing clients. Sure. And it's funny, we have one of our clients is a large SEO company. And I remember, and I suggested this, and the CEO, the founder, had this look on his face. He's like, you guys are going to be wasting hours on this. And I'm like, let's just do it. Let's just see what the value of this is. And we're only going to do 3 interviews. They're an hour each. And I'm like, I would like for you to sit through those interviews. He's like, well, no, we're going to be asking them. I'm like, no, I'm not going to be asking them at all about how it is working with you. And I'm like, I'm not concerned about that. That's not what me as a CRO I'm concerned about. I want to, like I mentioned, I want to sit and talk to them, and we get on the first call, and I'm like, okay, hey, XYZ, thank you for jumping. So what was going on in your life when you thought to yourself, you need to hire an SEO agency? Well, our budget got cut. We just did this. And it was about the story of what's going on in their lives, yep. Before they pulled the trigger. Post pulling the trigger, I'm like, okay, that's your service and how you can fix what you need to fix in your service. But in order for me to convert, I want to know the story that's going on in your customer's life, in your client's life, the words that they use, and basically, just use those words in the copy. So we do the 3 interviews. I'm talking to the founder, and I'm like, what do you think about the copy? He's like, I never imagined the value that we'll get. He's like, this is worth tens of millions of dollars for us. And we took the headline, which is sort of funny. The headline that came from one of his customers. He said, I thought that all SEO companies sucked until I saw the results. I'm like, this is a powerful headline. So my client is like, no, we can't use that on our site. This is too too aggressive. I'm like, no. This is exactly what your clients, this is what they're thinking, correct? This is what they're struggling with. They're about to come and hire you, and they're thinking, should I? I've been burned a couple of times before. Like, I'm like, use that and just see the impact. I think messaging and that, going back to searchers' intent and the visitors' intent, what they are trying to do is very powerful. Something else that you want to do is launch a poll on your website, a simple poll, and you can ask people, so, hey, thank you for visiting our website. What are you trying to do today? I'm trying to learn about, we did this on our site. I'm trying to learn about CRO, trying to hire a CRO agency, trying to learn about digital marketing. My wish as somebody who owns an agency is to convert everybody, correct? It's like, hey, we want to convert 90% of the visitors. Well, I discovered that 98% of the visitors that came to our site are interested in learning about CRO. I was sitting with my marketing team and I told them 98% of them are just there to learn. That's it. You're not going to increase your conversion rate beyond 2 or 3 or 4% if you're lucky. Because most people and knowing that, I told them, like, okay, knowing that, well, guess what? We need to provide them with more value, more educational material on our site. We never brought up, like, the different educational courses that we have on our site. I'm like, bring it to the homepage. It is what it is. If that's what people want and that's their intent, let's bring it to the forefront. So understanding visitors' intent and really, that can drive your marketing and help you really understand how you best provide the service that people are looking for.
Sure, you bring up a good point, because the old style SEO would say, okay, well, we need an H1 tag on this page, and we have to mention our main keyword, and because if we don't mention this particular keyword, that page won't rank well, and we have to mention the keyword in the title tag, and we have to mention it, right there in the H1 tag on the page, and so forth. And what I'm hearing from you is that, we have to kind of shift our strategy a little bit to actually get stuff to kind of convert a little bit better. And I think also that that as I learn more and more every day about the search engines and their technology now, and being able to understand more natural language and so forth, that it's not just, okay, want to rank for this keyword, we put it at the beginning. The old style is we put it at the beginning of the title tag, and then we put a big H1 tag on the page, and that's our main keyword, and then we have have some copy, and so forth. And that kind of is a lot different than working on converting somebody. Especially because you said something about you're talking about the talking actually to the visitor versus just, like I said, just throwing a
whole bunch of words. Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because I always think of Google, because it controls the whole space. I mean, right now that's the major player or the player. And I think I'm like, okay, so they have advanced AI with natural language processing, so they're understanding more. They own the search results. They own Chrome, which is 50-60% of the market. They own Google Analytics, which is a whole other, I mean, they know what people are doing on the website and how they react. They probably even know it, by the way, better than us, marketers, correct? Because we use some tools, but Google can analyze what people are clicking.
And they have data Android as well. Obviously.
Exactly. Oh, so yeah, and Android as well. So imagine the massive amount of data analysis that they can do, on the site, understanding your visitors, building machine learning algorithms on how people interact with your website, and really understand whether your site copy and your site design work well for the visitors or not. Versus even a big company, okay, you'll have a marketing team, but they're probably not doing such advanced analysis. So I think you focus on the visitors. Now, you don't ignore kind of the rules of SEO, because I've also had clients. I'm like, what's happening over here? Why are you on this constantly spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on PPC? And you're really hostage. You're like, well, I don't want to be hostage to SEO. I'm like, listen, you're going to be spending money on marketing either way, and I'd rather diversify. I'd rather not put my eggs in one basket. Diversify. Don't okay, you got to do SEO because I mean, yes, you are paying for hiring an SEO team or an SEO agency. You are paying for PPC as well. You're going to have to look at social. and figure out how to actually figure out how to convert from social. I'm like, you got to do everything, but ultimately at the very center of it is the visitor. And we live in an age where everything has been commoditized. If you think about it, we were conducting usability tests for eBay. Love this, we're telling people buy an iPhone 11 on eBay. So we bring people, we're watching them, and this guy tries to search on iPhone 11 on eBay, gets very frustrated. He's a very technical guy, like a software engineer, goes out to Google, puts in sites, ebay.com, and puts iPhone 11. Well, Amazon happens to rank second or third results. So he's looking, he clicks on the Amazon link. He goes through the Amazon, site. He adds the item to his cart. He's going through the checkout, and I'm sitting there. I'm like, dude, stop. What were you doing? And he's like, oh, I'm placing the order. I'm doing the usability test. I'm like, no, you're doing it on Amazon. He's like, oh, really? I sat there and I'm like with the VP of marketing at eBay, and I'm like, this is scary. This is what I'm talking about. You got to figure out the visitors and their headsets. We gave him a task. We gave him eBay's website. He was converting in a usability test. Who was converting on an Amazon website? I'm like, that's scary. You got to think through that, figure out how to provide that best experience to visitors, because, they can replace you in a heartbeat and they wouldn't even know it.
Sure, definitely. Another question I had for you actually is, how much, we've talked about ad copy and so forth, but how much does it, it colors and, changing the position on the page and call to actions, and, something I always think about also is the length of a form. If you have so many different fields in there, if you're signing someone up for an email, for a newsletter, email newsletter, name and email address is probably all of what you need. And that would probably convert better than, say, name, company name, phone number, email address, address, website, and so forth.
Yeah, definitely. Let's start with the last one. I think marketers in general, just like politicians, we like to ask for as much information as we can get. If people are giving it to us, we'll take it. I always say, I'm like, first thing that you want to ask yourself, do I really need that information? Can I get it from somewhere else? That's another question. Lots of times people ask for give me your name, give me your last name. Even sometimes, by the way, I'm like, why do you even ask for two fields, name and then last name? Why don't you just put it in one field, full name, and you can just, any developer can write a quick script to break it for you. Instead of asking for two fields, here, I cut down by one field. Phone number, do you really need the phone number? Sometimes you do. If somebody's contacting you, it makes sense. You want that phone number. But if somebody's subscribing to your list, I was subscribing on a site and they wanted my mailing address. I'm like, why on earth? I'm just giving you my email. Why do you need my physical mailing address? Figure out the least amount of information that you need to get things going. And if there's information that you need, also ask yourself, can I get it from somewhere else? If somebody gives you their company name, can you look on LinkedIn and figure out their annual revenue? Yes, you can. You can figure out the number of employees. You can figure out the revenue. You can figure out his title also by a quick lookup. And that works for 85, 90% of the people. If you're going to ask for a lot of information, you must have it. Break down the form into a two-step form. On the very first step, you ask for the basics. Get the name, get the email, get the phone number or the company. That's enough for you to contact them, correct? On step 2, you can say, hey, we've already collected the information. We've sent it to our CEO or to our founders. They're going to contact you right away. Would you mind telling us a little bit more? What's your revenue? What's your budget? What's your timeline? By doing this, we've increased our conversion rates. I think almost 5x, where we're like, hey, you broke the information, you present it in a way where people can digest it. It made just life easier. When it comes to, let's talk about colors. I think the rule that I have is just make sure that your CTA and colors, that they're clear. People can recognize where the CTAs are. If you're selling, you don't want me to be looking around. I'm like, trying to it's kind of a search for an adventure in a jungle. I'm like, where is their CTA? I'm like, I'm ready to contact you, but I can't find it. Now, it's sort of interesting. We're a consulting business, and lots of times with consulting, I tell people, I'm like, listen, if you're an IBM, correct? Let's say I don't have to have CTAs in everywhere. People who wants to contact IBM, doesn't mean that you hide your CTA, your contact form should be there in the header. It's clear for people. You don't have to have it I was looking at a company and every 4 or 5 lines, they had to call us, contact us. I'm like, look, too desperate. Let's relax a little bit. Now, at the same time, on a long copy landing page, especially on mobile, I like to have my CTAs repeated every 200 or so words. I'm like, okay, let's bring a CTA, because on mobile, it's difficult to find those CTAs. It's different than long copy landing page, where people will figure it out. Is I still want to repeat my CTAs, but I can have them every 400, 500, 600 words. I'm a bit more comfortable on a desktop. When it comes to testing, and this is kind of the rule, we always test. As I was talking to somebody a couple days ago, and he said, Khalid, you don't present like, you should have presented your opinion in a matter of fact. And I told him, I've been humbled way too many times by visitors. I think things should be done a certain way. We run a test and the result comes so differently. Unlike most CROs who have done CRO for a long time are very careful. So we'll test things out. We're running an A/B test. Here's your original design. Here's a new design. Split the visitors and see. Let the visitors judge. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have an opinion based on my experience. It does, but still, it's an opinion until it's validated by visitors, until it's validated by the market, correct? They always say design is subjective until you put it out there, and then the market judges it, whether it works or not.
Sure. So tell me a little bit about the content conversion optimization training that you have, and some of the training that you put together.
Sure. So we've been doing training, oh gosh, for the last almost 10 years in different conferences, from the SMXs to the PopCons. You mentioned it, we've done it. And we've been stuck at home due to COVID. And over the years, I've been buying just audio equipment and video equipment and cameras. And my wife kept on nagging me, like, why? Finally, I have an answer for her, because COVID is going to happen and we're going to record this training. So we recorded the training finally. It's actually available, and we've already I think within the first couple of weeks we had 50 members who actually purchased the training. It's available on bit.ly/CRO Mastery. It's basically it's actually more than the 8 hours, because typically in conferences we do 8 hours. This is about 160 lessons. I think there's about 70 videos that we've recorded there, lengthy videos. We've also added lots of content that, and the training, and we continue to add modules to it. So it's been exciting. So we figured it's an opportunity for anybody who's sitting at home, wants to learn about conversion optimization. It's a great way, or they want to train their agency or their staff. It's a good way to get that training.
And that is at bit.ly/CRO Mastery.
Exactly, CRO Mastery. Yep.
Great.
Excellent.
So how can we get in touch with you and your company? It's invest.com, invesp.com.
Yep, and I'm active on LinkedIn. I never managed to get LinkedIn to work until this year. Maybe it's COVID, maybe it's being stuck at home.
Sure.
But finally, I'm active on LinkedIn, so I post daily. There's lots of discussion, lots of interaction usually on my posts. So I'd love to connect with anybody. We should share kind of the knowledge and exchange ideas there.
Okay, sounds great. So this has been the Digital Marketing Podcast with Bill Hartzer, the Digital Marketing with Bill Hartzer podcast for Thursday, July 30th, 2020. Thanks again, Khalid Saleh from invest.com, and it's an invesp.com, as well as bit.ly/CRO Mastery, for learning a little bit more about conversion rate optimization. Thanks again for joining me this afternoon.
Thank you, Bill.